He promised to take all the pain from her life on one single condition. For 3 months she would have to obey, be silent, and undress. But in the midst of her surrender, she began to feel something she swore she would never feel again. Love. If you like stories of love and romance, watch until the end. You won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment saying where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. The rain fell relentlessly over New York City when Clarice Anderson climbed the steps of the commercial building on Park Avenue. The cheap umbrella she'd bought at a 99-cent store was already disintegrating at the edges, letting icy drops seep through the collar of her second-hand blazer. She took a deep breath, trying to control the suffocating feeling that had been her companion for weeks. At 36, Clarice no longer believed in new beginnings. Life for her had become a sequence of grey days, one after another, as if she were walking through a silent fire, trying to salvage what was left of her dignity from the ashes. The lobby of the imposing Davison Business Center was the materialization of the abyss that separated people like her from people like her boss. Italian marble floors reflected indirect lighting, minimalist sculptures decorated strategic corners, and impeccably dressed receptionists answered calls behind tempered glass counters. Clarice felt immediately out of place, as she always did. Even after 3 years working there as an administrative assistant in the contracts department of Davison Private Security, she still felt like an intruder. "Good morning, Ms. Anderson," greeted the security guard, a middle-aged man who always treated her with exaggerated respect. "You're soaked." "Tell me about it, Mr. Arnold. This umbrella has seen better days." She tried to smile, but she knew the result was just a grimace of exhaustion. In the elevator, Clarice adjusted the brown hair that the humidity made even more rebellious. The side mirror reflected the image of a woman of understated beauty, but marked by fatigue. Deep, dark circles framed hazel eyes that no longer sparkled as they once had. She wore basic makeup, bought on sale at the supermarket. Her navy blue blazer, worn and slightly faded at the elbows, concealed a simple white blouse. The black dress pants, on the verge of unacceptable, completed the look of someone striving to keep up appearances. The 18th floor housed the company's administrative department. Clarice walked down the quiet hallway to her desk, isolated in a corner near the break room. At that hour of the morning, only a few employees had arrived. She turned on her computer and opened her purse, pulling out a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, the breakfast she hadn't had time to eat at home. Raphael, her 15-year-old son, had overslept again. The teenager's silence grew denser, more impenetrable with each passing day. "Late again, Anderson?" The voice of Monica Silver, the department supervisor and Clarice's self-declared nemesis, cut through her thoughts. The woman in her early 40s, with perfectly straightened blonde hair and artificially long nails, stared at her with her usual disdain. "Just 5 minutes. Monica, Raphael, always Raphael, isn't it? Look, Clarice, you know how things are here. Mr. Davison doesn't tolerate tardiness. Not everyone has the privilege of being a single mother to use as an excuse." Clarice swallowed the retort that burned in her throat. She needed this job more than she needed her pride. The overdue bills, the mortgage payments, Raphael's school tuition, it all piled up into a mountain that threatened to collapse on her head at any moment. Ever since Roger, her ex-husband, had disappeared 8 months ago, taking their savings and leaving only debts and broken promises, Clarice had been living on a financial knife's edge. The divorce was merely the final blow to a marriage that had been dead for years. Betrayals, lies, and that oppressive silence she now saw reflected in her son. She checked her emails, took down messages, and began reviewing pending contracts. At 11 o'clock, her cell phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Ms. Anderson? This is the office at St. Benedict's School. We need you to come in urgently. There's been an incident with Raphael." Clarice's heart pounded. "Is he okay?" "Is he hurt?" "He's physically fine, but we need to speak with you in person. It's about his behavior, again." Clarice hung up and took a deep breath, trying to contain the panic. It was the 3rd time that month the school had called. Raphael, always so studious and quiet, was now skipping classes, talking back to teachers, and isolating himself more and more. It was as if something were eating him from the inside, something Clarice couldn't reach. "Monica, I need to leave for an hour." "It's an emergency with my son." The supervisor didn't even look up from her papers. "Impossible, Anderson. Today is the quarterly contract review. Mr. Davison is in the building." "But it's an emergency, the school—" "Everyone has problems, Clarice. I take care of my mother with Alzheimer's, and I don't miss work for it." Clarice felt her blood boil. She was about to retort when her attention was drawn to the end of the hallway. A tall, imposing man was emerging from the executive suite, surrounded by 3 aides all speaking at once. Cesar Davison, CEO of the Davison Group, rarely appeared on that floor. When he did, it was as if the very air changed density. At 47, Cesar emanated an aura of power that went beyond his billion-dollar fortune or his position of command. It was something primal, almost palpable. Tall at almost 6'3", he kept his body in impeccable shape thanks to the military discipline he'd carried over from his years in the U.S. Army. His angular face was marked by a defined jawline and eyes of such a light gray they seemed silver under certain lights, an inheritance from his Scottish grandmother. His precisely cut black hair showed strategically placed gray strands at his temples, lending him an additional air of authority. He dressed like someone who knows the exact value of each piece, a tailor-made Italian suit, a discreet yet very expensive Swiss watch, handmade shoes. Everything about him declared power, control, and a cold elegance that intimidated even the most confident of his subordinates. Clarice lowered her eyes as he passed. Cesar Davison was an almost mythical figure in the company. He was spoken of in whispers in the hallways. They said he came from nothing, the son of a maid from a small town in Mississippi, and had built an empire after serving in the special forces. Others swore his fortune had obscure origins, from partnerships with Russian businessmen or classified government contracts. There were rumors of a marriage shrouded in confidentiality clauses, of his wife's mysterious death, of his reclusive behavior, and the fact that he was never seen in public with women. "That's no way to greet your superior." "Anderson," Monica whispered with malicious glee. Before Clarice could react, Cesar Davison's deep, controlled voice cut through the air. "Ms. Anderson, isn't it?" She looked up, surprised. She never imagined he knew her name. For an insane moment, she thought he might have overheard her conversation with Monica. "Yes, sir. In my office, please. There's a matter I need to discuss." Without waiting for a reply, Cesar turned and walked back down the hall, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Monica stared at her with a mixture of shock and envy. "What did you do?" the supervisor hissed. Clarice swallowed hard. "Nothing that I know of." With trembling legs, she followed him down the corridor toward the president's office. She had never been there before. Most employees at her level never got near Cesar Davison's private sanctuary. Her heart was beating erratically. Was it about her being late? Or worse, was she about to be fired? The president's office occupied the most privileged corner of the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of New York City. As she entered, Clarice felt immediately diminished by the grandeur of the space. Minimally decorated, the room displayed only a few pieces of contemporary art and exclusive designer furniture. Cesar Davison sat behind a black marble desk that seemed to float on an almost invisible base. "Close the door," he ordered without looking up from the documents in front of him. Clarice obeyed and remained standing, unsure of what to do next. The seconds dragged on as he continued to read. Finally, Cesar looked up. Those silver-gray eyes pierced her, as if they could see beyond her skin, beyond her carefully constructed defenses. "Sit," he indicated the chair in front of him. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped in her lap. "How long have you been working at Davison Security?" 3 years and 4 months, sir," he nodded slowly. "And you live in Queens, in a house mortgaged by Continental Bank. You have a 15-year-old son, Raphael, who attends St. Benedict's School on a partial scholarship. Your ex-husband, Roger Stevens, disappeared 8 months ago, leaving approximately $87,000 in debt in your name. Correct?" Clarice felt her blood run cold. How did he know all that, and why? "How do you—" "Please answer the question." "Yes, that's correct." Cesar leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "I also know that you are 3 months behind on your mortgage payments, that your son is having trouble at school, and that at this very moment you are worried because you were called to go there. but Monica Silva denied your request to leave. Clarice's mouth felt dry. This was surreal. Sir, I don't understand why. Have you noticed anything strange in the last few weeks? Anything out of the ordinary? The question caught her by surprise. Immediately, she thought of the paid bill she hadn't paid. The unfamiliar car parked across from her house. The unmarked envelope with a copy of her mortgage contract, marked in red. The anonymous note in her locker, everything can change. But you have to ask, how do you know? About that? For the first time, a faint smile touched Cesar Davison's lips. It wasn't a warm smile, but something calculated, measured. I know many things, Clarice. May I call you Clarice? She nodded, unable to find words. Clarice, I've been observing you for some time. I see a dedicated, competent woman who maintains her dignity even when everything seems to be falling apart around her. I see someone who sacrifices for her son, who works overtime without complaining, who swallows humiliations from people like Monica Silva because she needs to survive. He stood up, walked around the desk and sat on the edge too close to her. Clarice could smell the discreet scent of his imported cologne, notes of wood and spice. I also see someone on the verge of collapse. Someone who needs help but is too proud to ask for it. I didn't come here to ask for help, she replied, finding her voice. I don't know why I'm here. You're here because I wanted you to be. Because the time has come. Time for what? Cesar studied her for a long moment before answering. To make you a proposal that could change your life. He stood up again and walked to the window, observing the city below like a king surveying his kingdom. I can pay for everything, Clarice. The debts, the mortgage on the house, Raphael's school, a full scholarship, not just partial. I can ensure your ex-husband never bothers you again. I can erase everything that is dragging you down. Clarice felt her breath catch. This couldn't be real. Why would you do that? Cesar turned slowly. Because I want something in return. An icy sensation ran down Clarice's spine. Of course, men like him didn't offer anything without expecting something back, and she could already imagine what it would be. I'm not available for that kind of arrangement, she said, standing up. Excuse me. It's not what you're thinking, his voice stopped her. I am not proposing a sexual relationship. Clarice paused, confused. Then what? I want 3 months of your life. 3 months of surrender. Not sexual. Not physical. But emotional. Your routine. Your silence. Your obedience. She stared at him, trying to process what she had just heard. I don't understand. There is no formal contract. No witnesses. You will continue to work normally during the day. At night, you will come to the 24th floor of this building, a floor that officially does not exist. There you will follow my instructions, carry out tasks that I will determine. Nothing illegal, nothing that will harm third parties, just a ritual, a ritual. What kind of ritual? Of discovery. Of liberation. He took 2 steps toward her. If you accept, you will be mine. Completely mine. If you refuse, you will be free. But you will never be seen the same way in this company again. Clarice felt a warmth rise up her legs, a strange tingling that wasn't desire, but shock, pure adrenaline. Her body reacted before her mind could. This wasn't just an indecent proposal. It was something far more complex, an abyss dressed as a promise. Why me? What do you gain from this? Der stability. Your questions will be answered in due time. Right now, I need your answer. Clarice's mind was spinning. Any sane person would leave that room immediately. The man was clearly disturbed, and what he was proposing was at the very least unethical. But then she thought of Raphael, of her son's growing silence, the problems at school, the possibility of losing the house he had grown up in. She thought of the nights she cried hidden in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear, of the stacked-up bills, of the constant feeling of suffocation. If I accept, how do I know you'll keep your end of the bargain? Cesar opened a drawer and took out a folder. Inside were bank documents, the deed to her house, the mortgage agreement. Even before your answer, I have already taken the first step. Your mortgage was paid off this morning. Consider it a gesture of good faith. Clarice examined the papers with trembling hands. They were authentic. How did you manage this? I have resources. And motivation. She looked at the closed door, then back at the man in front of her. It was madness. Complete madness. And yet, A voice inside her whispered that this might be her only way out. Do the 3 months start today? A glint of satisfaction passed through Caesar's eyes. They start now. He walked to a bookshelf and pressed something. A panel slid open, revealing a small private elevator. This elevator leads to the 24th floor. You will receive an exclusive access card. At night, after your son is asleep, you will come here. Clarice swallowed hard. And if I change my mind later, then it all ends. You keep what you've already received, but there will be nothing more. A moment of silence stretched between them, thick with possibilities and dangers. Yes, she said finally. I accept. Something dark and satisfied shone in Caesar's eyes. It wasn't a smile, but a kind of sated hunger. Excellent. Now return to your work. Act normally. And as for the problem at school, it's been resolved. I called the principal. Raphael has a new private tutor, courtesy of the company. A full academic excellence scholarship. Clarice felt dizzy. You already knew I would accept. I was hoping. He returned to his desk. And Clarice, from now on when we are alone, you will call me Caesar. Not Sir, not Mr. Davison, just Caesar. She nodded, unable to articulate any words. You may go now. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. As if in a trance, Clarice walked to the door. As she touched the handle, his voice reached her again. One last thing. From this moment on, you will no longer wear those worn-out clothes. You will find a corporate card on your desk. Use it to buy a new wardrobe. Something that reflects your true essence, not your circumstance. Clarice left the room feeling as if she had just signed a pact with the devil himself. Perhaps she had. But for the first time in months, she also felt something she had forgotten. Hope. For the rest of the day, Clarice moved like a sleepwalker. She found the corporate card on her desk, inside a black envelope with her name engraved in gold letters. Inside was also a small silver magnetic card, with no identification, which she intuited was the access to the mysterious 24th floor. What did Mr. Davison want with you? Monica asked when she returned. Nothing important, Clarice lied. Just some details about old contracts I processed. The supervisor eyed her suspiciously, but didn't press the matter. Clarice's phone rang again. It was from Raphael's school, informing her that the situation had been resolved and that her son was now with a private educational advisor, courtesy of Davison Securities' academic incentive program. The principal sounded impressed and slightly intimidated. At 6 in the evening, Clarice left work and went straight home. The modest apartment in Queens, inherited from her parents, was the only asset she had managed to preserve after the divorce. She found Raphael sitting on the couch, playing a video game, an old console that had been a gift from his father years ago. Hi, honey. How was school today? Raphael shrugged without taking his eyes off the screen. At 15, he was already almost as tall as she was. He had his father's brown eyes, but the determined expression that Clarice recognized from her own youthful portraits. Normal. The principal called me. They said you have a tutor now? He paused the game and looked at her with a mixture of confusion and interest. Yeah, some guy showed up. Said it's part of a program from your company. He's different. He said things that make sense. It was more than Raphael had said in weeks. Clarice sat down next to him, trying not to show too much surprise. What kind of things? About finding purpose, about how anger is a fuel that needs direction. He hesitated. About my father. How I shouldn't let what he did define who I am. Clarice felt a lump in her throat. Who was this tutor who had achieved in one afternoon what she had been trying to do for months? And how did you feel talking about it? Good. He doesn't talk like normal adults. He doesn't lecture or say everything's going to be okay. Raphael looked away. He said that sometimes things are just a mess, and the important thing isn't to pretend they're not, but to find strength even when they are. That sounded strangely like something César would say. Was it a coincidence? Does this tutor have a name? Professor Miles. He's going to meet me 3 times a week after school. Clarice nodded, processing the information. I'm glad you like him. After dinner, when Raphael had retreated to his room to study, something he hadn't done voluntarily in weeks, Clarice sat on the small apartment balcony, looking out at the city. Her phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. 24th floor. 10 p.m. Wear black. Her heart sped up. It was real. It was happening. For a moment, she considered ignoring the message, pretending that morning's conversation had never happened. But then she looked inside the apartment, at the door to Raphael's room. Her son seemed better than he had in months. The house was safe, the debts resolved, all thanks to a deal she still didn't fully understand. At 9:40 p.m., after checking that Raphael was asleep, Clarice slipped out quietly. She wore a simple black dress, the only one she owned saved for formal occasions that rarely happened. She took a cab to the Davison Business Center, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. The building was nearly deserted at that hour. Only security guards and the cleaning crew. She used her employee ID to get in and headed for the main elevator. It was only then that she noticed a problem. The button panel only went up to the 23rd floor. The 24th floor really didn't exist, at least not officially. Clarice took a deep breath and inserted the silver card into a discreet slot below the panel. Immediately, a virtual button appeared on the digital screen, 24. She pressed it and felt the elevator ascend rapidly. When the doors opened, Clarice found an environment completely different from the rest of the corporate building. The entire floor seemed to have been transformed into a kind of minimalist loft. There were no partitions, only areas subtly defined by changes in flooring or lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the illuminated city. Soft, classical music filled the air. Clarice recognized Debussy, one of the few things she had learned during the piano lessons her mother had insisted she take in childhood. The space was empty, except for carefully selected furniture. Leather armchairs, glass tables, bookshelves with books and art objects. "Come in," Caesar's voice came from somewhere to her right. He was sitting in a dark leather armchair, watching the city. He wore a simple white shirt and black dress pants. No tie, no jacket. He looked more approachable like this, but no less intimidating. "You came," he commented as she approached, as if there had been a real possibility she wouldn't. "I made a promise," Clarice replied, keeping a few feet of distance. Caesar indicated an armchair opposite him. "Sit. Would you like a glass of wine?" She hesitated before sitting. "No, thank you." "You have questions. Ask them." Clarice took a deep breath. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Your presence. Your obedience, your honesty." "For what?" Caesar studied her for a moment. "Have you ever wondered why some people connect instantly, while others can spend a lifetime together and remain strangers?" The question caught her off guard. "I suppose it's chemistry, compatibility. It's more than that. It's recognition. Some souls recognize each other even when they've never met before." He leaned forward slightly. "When I first saw you, Clarice, I felt that recognition, as if a part of me that had been dormant was awakened." She felt a shiver run down her spine. "You don't even know me. I know more than you imagine." He stood up and walked to a side table, taking out an envelope. "Your mother's name was Helen Anderson, an English teacher at St. Francis High School. Died of cancer 7 years ago. Your father, Robert Anderson, was an accountant killed in a car accident when you were 12. You studied English literature at NYU, but dropped out in your 3rd year when you became pregnant with Raphael. You married Roger Stevens due to family pressure, even though you knew the relationship had no future." Clarice's mouth went dry. "How do you know all this?" "I have resources and interest." "Why? Why me? I'm an ordinary employee with nothing special about me." Caesar smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's where you're mistaken. There is something in you, Clarice, something rare, a strength you yourself are unaware of, a capacity for survival that few people possess." He approached and, to her surprise, knelt in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. "I can't fully explain why you. I only know that when I saw you, I knew I needed to have you in my life. Not as a lover, not as an employee, as something different." Clarice's heart raced. His proximity was unsettling. "And what does that involve?" "Exactly. What will I be doing here?" Caesar stood up and walked to a table, picking up a small object that looked like an earpiece. "To begin with, this. Every night you will come here. You will wear this communicator. Through it I will give you instructions. Sometimes I will be present, sometimes not. You will perform tasks that I may request. It could be something simple, like setting a table for dinner, or complex, like writing about your deepest fears. And this gives you what? Pleasure. Understanding. He stopped in front of her again. You see, Clarice, the world is made of power and submission. We all bow to something or someone, to money, to fear, to social conventions. True freedom comes from consciously choosing what we submit to. And you want me to submit to you. I want you to discover who you really are, without the weights you carry, the debts, the ex-husband, the financial worries. All of that has been removed. Now all that's left is you, in your essence. Clarice felt a mixture of fear and fascination. There was something hypnotic in the way he spoke, as if every word was carefully chosen. And if I refuse to do something you ask, then you say no. And it all ends. He stepped away. This is not a legal contract, Clarice. It is an agreement between two people. You can end it at any time, but if you do, there will be no second chance. She nodded slowly, processing everything. And what about work? People will notice changes. That's already been taken care of. Starting tomorrow, you will be transferred to the executive department as my personal assistant. That will explain any frequent interaction between us. Your salary will be tripled. Monica Silva will no longer be your supervisor. You've thought of everything. It's what I do. He held out the small communicator. Put this on. Your first task begins now. With slightly trembling fingers, Clarice took the device and placed it in her ear. Immediately, Cesar's voice sounded clear, even though he was several feet away, speaking normally. Perfect. Now walk to the window. She obeyed, feeling strangely dissociated, as if watching herself from the outside. Look at the city. Millions of people down there, each trapped in their own story. Some are struggling to survive, as you were. Others have everything and yet feel an impossible void. Clarice looked out at the lights of New York City, feeling the weight of his words. Now, close your eyes and say out loud something you've never told anyone. A secret, a wish, a fear. Anything. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding. This was madness, and yet there was something liberating in the idea of revealing something she had never shared. Her voice failed. She took a deep breath and tried again. Sometimes I wish Roger had actually died, instead of just leaving. It would have been easier to explain to Raphael. It would have been cleaner. When she opened her eyes, Cesar was beside her, watching her intently. A painful truth, but a truth nonetheless. Good. He touched her shoulder lightly, the first physical contact between them. That's enough for today. Tomorrow come at 9 p.m. Wear something blue. And just like that, as abruptly as it had begun, the first session was over. Clarice removed the communicator and handed it back. Is that all? For today, yes. We're starting slowly. She nodded, still trying to process the strangeness of it all. Can I go then? Of course. The elevator will take you directly to the ground floor. A company car is waiting to take you home. Clarice walked to the elevator, feeling his gaze on her back. As the doors opened, she turned. Caesar, what happens after the 3 months? He studied her for a moment, his face an impenetrable mask. After the 3 months, you will be free. Freer than you have ever been. And I. And you? An enigmatic smile touched his lips. And I will have what I have been searching for a long time. The doors closed, leaving Clarice alone with her doubts and a strange tingling under her skin. Something had begun there, something she didn't fully understand, but which, somehow, was already beginning to transform her. In the car on the way home, Clarice realized her breathing was deeper, her shoulders less tense. It was as if a weight had been temporarily lifted, not because of the money or the newfound financial security, but because of something more basic. For the first time in years, she had spoken a truly personal thought out loud without fear of judgment, and that, she realized with astonishment, was both liberating and addictive. The next morning, Clarice woke before her alarm. For a moment, she lay there staring at the peeling ceiling of her bedroom, wondering if the previous night had been just a fever dream. She reached for the nightstand and picked up the paid-off mortgage documents. No, it wasn't a dream. She had really made a deal with Caesar Davison, the most powerful and feared man in the company. A deal she didn't fully understand, but that was already starting to change her life. She got up and went to check on Raphael. Her son was still sleeping soundly, his face relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in a long time. Clarice smiled, gently stroking the teenager's hair. Whatever this mysterious Professor Miles was doing, it seemed to be working. In the bathroom, she faced her reflection in the mirror while brushing her teeth. There was something different in her eyes, a spark that had been missing for years. She remembered César's words about using the corporate card to buy new clothes that reflect your true essence. She barely knew what that essence was after so many years of just surviving. She dressed in her usual clothes and headed to the company, already wondering what she would find. Would the department change be real? What would it be like to work directly for Caesar? As soon as she arrived at the Davison Business Center, she noticed the difference. The lobby security guard greeted her with a new deference. "Good morning, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Santos from HR asked that you stop by his office as soon as you arrived." In the Human Resources Department, a middle-aged man with a solemn expression received her. "Ms. Anderson, I have excellent news. The board has approved your transfer to the executive department as personal assistant to Mr. Davison. It's a considerable promotion." He pushed some documents toward her. "Your new salary, benefits, and new responsibilities are detailed here." Clarice examined the papers, feeling a mixture of shock and gratitude. The figure there was more than triple what she had been earning. "This is very generous. Mr. Davison values competence and loyalty," the man replied with a polite but distant smile. "Your desk has already been moved to the executive floor. Fernanda, the head secretary, will orient you." When Clarice arrived on the executive floor, the 23rd, just below César's mysterious private floor, she was greeted by an elegant woman of about 50, with grey hair cut in a perfect bob and impeccable posture. "Ms. Anderson, welcome. I'm Fernanda Cardoso, Mr. Davison's executive secretary for 15 years. She smiled, but her eyes assessed Clarice meticulously. "Your workstation is here." Fernanda indicated a sleek desk strategically positioned between the main reception area and the door to César's office. It was a place of honor and at the same time of great exposure. Anyone who wanted to see Caesar would have to go through Clarice first. "Mr. Davison left specific instructions regarding your duties. You will manage his personal schedule, not the corporate one. That remains with me. You will handle confidential matters, special projects and screen visitors for private meetings." Fernanda handed her a state-of-the-art tablet. "Everything is synchronized here. Emails, appointments, contacts. Mr. Davison is extremely strict about punctuality and precision. When should I meet with him to receive direct instructions?" A faint smile touched Fernanda's lips. "Mr. Davison is in an external meeting all morning. He'll be back after lunch. In the meantime, familiarize yourself with the system. Oh, and there's a delivery for you." The secretary pointed to a large black box on the desk, tied with a discreet silver ribbon. There was no card or identification. As soon as Fernanda walked away, Clarice carefully opened the box. Inside was an outfit: a perfectly tailored navy blue blazer, a light blue silk blouse, a black pencil skirt made of Italian fabric, and mid-heel shoes of the same color. Everything was elegant, understated, and obviously very expensive. Underneath the clothes, she found a card with just 2 words handwritten: "Get dressed, Caesar." Clarice felt her face flush. The order was clear. She took the box and went to the executive restroom, a luxurious space with individual stalls and an anteroom with armchairs and full-length mirrors. She changed quickly, surprised to find that every piece fit perfectly, as if it had been custom-made. When she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. The outfit accentuated her curves without being vulgar, projected authority without being intimidating. For the first time in years, Clarice saw herself not as the single mother struggling to survive, but as a woman in control, powerful in her own way. Upon returning to her desk, she noticed the surprised glances from other employees on the floor. Fernanda watched her for a moment, an unreadable expression on her face. "Mr. Davison has good taste. the secretary commented enigmatically, before returning to her work. The morning passed quickly as Clarice familiarized herself with her new duties. The system was complex but well organized. She discovered that Cesar maintained a strict separation between corporate business and his personal projects, which were simply classified as private initiatives. Around 2 in the afternoon, the private elevator opened and Cesar emerged, accompanied by 2 men in dark suits, whom Clarice had never seen before. He paused briefly upon seeing her, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his normally impassive gaze. "Gentlemen, this is Clarice Anderson, my new personal assistant. Clarice, these are Mr. Volkov and Mr. Petrov, our associates from Moscow." The men greeted her with nods. Cesar continued, addressing her directly for the first time that day. "Arrange for coffee, please. And hold all calls for the next 30 minutes. "Yes, sir," Clarice replied, maintaining a professional tone. When she returned with the coffee, she noticed that the door to Cesar's office was ajar. Inside, the men were speaking in English, with Cesar occasionally responding in surprisingly fluent Russian. She caught fragments about expansion into Latin America, government contracts, and something about unconventional procedures. She felt a chill. What exactly did Davison Security do besides the private security services everyone knew about? After the visitors left, Cesar called her on the intercom. "Clarice, in my office, please." The office was even more imposing in the daylight. Through the panoramic windows, New York City stretched in all directions like an ocean of concrete and glass. Cesar was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, contemplating the city. "Close the door," he ordered without turning around. She obeyed, remaining near the entrance. "The clothes fit perfectly," he commented, finally turning to face her. "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me. It wasn't a gift. It was a necessity." He walked toward her, circling her slowly, assessing her. "You represent my office now. Your appearance reflects directly on me." Clarice stood motionless under his scrutiny, feeling the heat of his proximity. Cesar stopped in front of her, just inches away. "Are you comfortable with your new duties?" "I'm learning quickly." A faint smile touched his lips. "You always learn quickly, don't you, Clarice? Adaptation, survival, those are your natural talents." He moved away, returning to his desk. "This afternoon I want you to review the files for Project Phoenix. They are confidential. They will be on your tablet under encryption. The password is Debussy, the composer you recognized last night." Clarice was startled. "How did you know I recognized it?" "Your eyes. They flickered in recognition when the music started." He sat down, opening some documents on his computer. At 9 p.m. on the 24th floor. "Don't be late." The dismissal was clear. Clarice nodded and headed for the door. "And Clarice..." She turned. "Wear blue tonight," as instructed. For the rest of the afternoon, Clarice delved into the files of the so-called Project Phoenix. It was an enigmatic project, apparently related to the rehabilitation of ex-military personnel with war trauma. Davison Security had created a training and reintegration program, turning veterans into elite security agents. Among the documents, she found mentions of advanced psychological conditioning and obedience protocols, terms that left her uneasy. At 6, she received a message on her personal cell phone. It was Raphael. "Mom, I'm having dinner at Lucas's house to work on a history project. Professor Miles is giving me a ride afterward." "Is that okay?" Clarice frowned. Her son had barely left the house in months, and now he was having dinner at a friend's. And stranger still, this Professor Miles was driving him. She hesitated but decided to trust this positive change. "Okay, don't be too late. Love you." By 8 o'clock, the executive floor was practically empty. Only a few lights remained on in the offices of workaholic directors and in Caesar's office, where he continued to work. Clarice used the time to go to a nearby department store and buy a simple but elegant navy blue dress, using the corporate card she had received. The feeling of buying something without obsessively checking the price was strangely liberating. When she returned to the company, already changed into the new outfit, it was almost 9 p.m. She went straight to the private elevator and inserted the card that would take her to the 24th floor. This time, the atmosphere was different. The lighting was lower, creating an intimate mood. Different music was playing, not classical but soft jazz. In the center of the open space, a dinner table was set for two with fine china, crystal glasses, and lit candles. Punctual. Excellent. Caesar's voice came from a partially shadowed corner. He approached, wearing a dark blue shirt under a grey blazer. It was the first time she had seen him in clothes that matched hers, as if they were a couple. "The table is set for two," Clarice observed. "Yes, but only you will be dining." He held out the communicator from the previous night. "Put this on and sit down." She obeyed, feeling the same strange sense of dissociation as the night before. Caesar remained standing a few feet away. "Tonight you will dine alone, but you will not be alone." His voice came through clearly in the communicator, though he spoke in an almost whispered tone. "I want you to eat slowly. Savor every bite. Close your eyes between mouthfuls. Focus on the sensations, the flavors, the texture. And as you do this, I want you to tell me about your childhood, the moments that shaped who you are." A young man Clarice had never seen before entered silently, serving the first course, scallops with a saffron sauce. The aroma was intoxicating. "Begin," Caesar ordered. Clarice picked up her silverware and brought the first bite to her mouth. The taste was extraordinary. She had never tasted anything like it. She closed her eyes involuntarily, letting the sensation wash over her. "My childhood," she began hesitantly, her eyes still closed, "was happy until I was 12. My father was an accountant, he worked a lot, but he always made time for me. My mother was a teacher, strict but loving." As she ate, the memories flowed, with surprising clarity. She spoke of the small apartment where she grew up, the afternoons spent studying piano against her will, the summers at her grandmother's house in the Catskills. And then the rupture, the accident that killed her father on a highway during a storm. "Everything changed after that," she continued, now on the main course, grilled fish with herbs. "My mother had to work 2 jobs. I grew up faster than I should have. At 14, I was already taking care of the house. At 16, I was tutoring to help with expenses. The silent waiter appeared and disappeared, changing plates and pouring wine. Caesar remained at a distance, almost motionless, absorbing every word. In college, I met Roger. He was charismatic, popular, studying law. I fell in love with the man I thought he was, strong, decisive, ambitious. I got pregnant in my 3rd year. My mother was devastated. To her, education was everything. Seeing her daughter drop out of college to be a mother was like a personal failure. Clarice realized she was revealing things she had never organized so clearly in her own mind. It was as if the act of eating, of surrendering to sensory pleasure, had opened a channel to stored memories and truths. Roger and I married quickly. In the beginning, he tried. He got a job at a law firm. We rented a small apartment. When Raphael was born, my mother finally accepted the situation. She fell in love with her grandson instantly. Caesar moved for the first time in almost an hour, approaching to pour her more wine. The movement was so surprising that Clarice almost spilled her glass. "Continue," he instructed, now standing closer. Things started to fall apart when Raphael was 2. Roger lost his job, or was fired for negligence. I never knew the truth. He started drinking more, going out at night. He'd come home late, sometimes not at all. I started noticing the signs of other women. The money disappearing, the lies growing. The dinner continued with dessert, a delicate red berry cream being served. Clarice barely noticed what she was eating now, immersed in her recollections. My mother got sick when Raphael was 7. Pancreatic cancer, already advanced. Roger completely disappeared during that time. I took care of her alone until the end, with Raphael always by my side. He was so small but so strong. He would read to his grandmother even when she no longer responded. A tear ran down Clarice's face. Caesar, in an unexpected gesture, reached out and gently wiped it away with his thumb. It was after she died that I discovered Roger had mortgaged the house I inherited from my parents. He forged my signature. He was in debt to dangerous people, gambling, betting. I managed to work out a deal with the bank, but that's when I started working at Davison, in a much lower position just to keep up with the payments. She looked up, meeting Caesar's gaze directly. "Why are you doing this? Why do you want to know all these things?" He held her gaze. "Because everything we are is built by our stories. I need to know yours to understand who you really are. And who am I in your view? An enigmatic smile touched his lips. Someone who never had the chance to discover her true potential. Someone who survived but never truly lived. He drew closer, leaning over her. Someone who deserves more. There was a magnetic intensity to his presence, a force field that seemed to pull her toward him. Clarice felt her breath quicken. "Stand up," he ordered softly. She obeyed, standing inches from him. "Tonight you have given me a precious gift, truth, honesty. In return, I will show you something no one else has seen." Caesar led her to an area of the floor that was hidden by sliding panels. When he opened them, he revealed an art studio, easels, canvases, paints, and brushes meticulously organized. "You paint?" Clarice asked, surprised. "It's my form of meditation, of connecting with something beyond control and power." He walked among the covered canvases. "No one in the company knows about this. To the world, I am just the ruthless businessman." He uncovered a large canvas. It was an abstract portrait of a woman from behind, looking out a window. Only her hair and the curve of her neck were visible, but there was a palpable loneliness in the image, a melancholy that touched Clarice deeply. "Who is she?" Caesar hesitated before answering. "Someone I lost. Someone I failed to save." There was genuine pain in his voice, something she would never have expected from him. For a moment, Caesar Davison was not the feared CEO, the enigmatic billionaire. He was just a man carrying an invisible weight. "Your wife," Clarice ventured, remembering the rumors of a deceased wife. He turned, the moment of vulnerability already masked again by his controlled expression. "It's late. You should go home. Raphael will be waiting." The abrupt change caught her off guard. "But tomorrow at work, 8 a.m., and tomorrow night at 9 p.m. here again." He moved away, covering the painting. "Wear red tomorrow." "And Clarice," she waited. "Thank you for your honesty tonight." In the taxi home, Clarice felt strangely light, as if she had placed part of her burden on someone willing to carry it for her. There was something liberating in talking about her past that way, without being interrupted, without being judged, just being heard. At the same time, she realized she still knew very little about Caesar. The man was an enigma, showing only carefully selected fragments of himself. The painting, the pain in his voice when he mentioned someone lost. Who really was Caesar Davison? When she got home, she found Raphael already asleep. On the kitchen table, there was a note in her son's neat handwriting. "Mom, the project turned out great. Professor Miles helped me understand a lot about history. Thanks for trusting me. Good night." It was the longest, most affectionate note Raphael had left in months. Clarice saved it like a treasure, thinking about the strange coincidence, or was it synchronicity, that both she and her son were undergoing simultaneous transformations, guided by enigmatic figures who had suddenly appeared in their lives. The following days established a new pattern in her life. During the day, Clarice worked as Caesar's executive assistant, learning the intricate details of his business, screening his calls, organizing his private schedule. To the corporate world, she was just the new, efficient employee who had somehow earned the trust of the unattainable CEO. At night, on the 24th floor, a different dance unfolded. Each meeting followed a specific ritual, carefully planned by Caesar. One night he had her listen to recordings of therapy sessions, not hers, but of anonymous people discussing fear, abandonment, trust. On another, he asked her to write letters to people who had hurt her, including Roger and her mother, then burned them in a small, silent ceremony. In every meeting, Caesar maintained a physical distance, but a psychological proximity that grew increasingly intense. He rarely spoke of himself, but always pushed her to reveal more, to delve deeper into her own layers. It was like a hypnotic dance, where she gradually surrendered pieces of her soul while he remained enigmatic, yet ever more fascinating. At the company, the rumors began. Fernanda, the senior secretary, watched her with growing curiosity. One morning, while they were making coffee in the private kitchenette, the older woman finally said what she seemed to have been holding back for days. "You're not the first." "You know." Clarice froze, her cup suspended in midair. "What do you mean?" "Personal assistant. Young, attractive." Fernanda meticulously arranged sugar packets as she spoke. "He always picks the same type. Vulnerable but strong. Broken but not destroyed. I don't know what you're talking about. A sad smile touched the secretary's lips. Of course not. None of them did at first. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Just be careful with the 24th floor. Not everything that happens up there ends well. Before Clarice could reply, Fernanda walked away, leaving her with a chill down her spine. There were others before her. What had happened to them? That same afternoon, while organizing files in Caesar's private system, Clarice found a protected folder titled only AM. Normally, she would have respected his privacy, but Fernanda's words echoed in her mind. With her heart racing, she tried to access it, only to find it required a password she didn't have. Caesar called her into his office shortly after. I need you to sit in on a meeting today. Important visitors. Take notes, but don't interact unless I ask you to directly. She nodded, trying not to show her unease. Is there any specific preparation I should do? Just wear the red I asked for. His eyes narrowed slightly. And Clarice, excessive curiosity can be dangerous, especially with protected files. A chill ran down her spine. How did he know? The system must have some kind of alert. I apologize. It won't happen again. Caesar studied her for a moment. Some questions will be answered in due time. Others are best never asked. He turned his attention back to his documents. Tonight, after our usual meeting, you will remain on the floor. I have something special planned. The meeting that afternoon was with government representatives, 2 men from the Department of Defense and a woman who didn't identify herself, but whose bearing and manner of speaking suggested military or intelligence training. They discussed a security project for strategic facilities and repeatedly mentioned extraordinary measures and unconventional procedures. Clarice took meticulous notes, but increasingly wondered what kind of operations Davison Security was really involved in. At 9 o'clock that night, as arranged, she went up to the 24th floor. She wore a simple but elegant red dress as instructed. The space was different. The furniture had been rearranged, leaving a large open area in the center. Cesar was waiting for her, holding what looked like a black silk blindfold. Tonight we work on trust, he said without preamble. Put this on. Clarice hesitated. What are we going to do? Something that will require you to trust me completely. To relinquish control. She thought of Fernanda's words, the mysterious file, the strange meetings. An inner voice screamed at her to be careful. But another part, a part that was growing every day, wanted to surrender to this strange journey, to discover where this path led. If I refuse, then you refuse, and our agreement continues, but something will be lost. Caesar took a step toward her. I would never force you to do anything against your will. The power of choice will always be yours. Something in the way he said it, the sincerity in his voice, convinced her. Clarice took the blindfold and put it on, plunging herself into voluntary darkness. Immediately her other senses sharpened. Caesar's scent closer now, the sound of his footsteps on the wooden floor. The cool air indicating a window had been opened. I will guide you through the space, his voice sounded close to her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Trust me and do not resist. Caesar's hands lightly touched her shoulders, the first prolonged physical contact between them. Gently he began to guide her through the room. Clarice felt disoriented, vulnerable but strangely safe under his touch. Every step we take together is an act of trust, he spoke softly as they walked. You surrender control. I accept the responsibility of keeping you safe. They walked for a few minutes, with Cesar occasionally changing direction, sometimes speeding up, sometimes almost stopping. It was a silent dance, a constant negotiation of trust and surrender. Finally, he stopped her. Now comes the hardest part. I'm going to let you go. You will be alone, without sight, without support. But you will not be truly alone. I will be watching, protecting. I want you to walk on your own. But I could get hurt, bump into something. I will not allow that to happen. This is real trust, believing that I am taking care of you even when you cannot see or feel me. His hands left her shoulders. Clarice felt immediately helpless, adrift in an ocean of darkness. Take a step forward, Cesar instructed, his voice now coming from a distance. With her heart racing, she obeyed. Then another, and another. The sensation was terrifying and liberating at the same time. You're doing well, his voice came from another direction now. Continue. For several minutes, Clarice walked in the dark, guided only by Caesar's voice, which seemed to move constantly around her. Sometimes she felt him close, the warmth of his presence, his scent. Other times he seemed far away, just a disembodied voice in the void. Then suddenly she felt the floor change under her feet. It was no longer the smooth floor, but something that gave way slightly. A rug, perhaps? "Stop," Caesar ordered, now very close. Firm hands grasped her shoulders again, steadying her. "You trusted me. You surrendered to the unknown." His voice was so close she could feel his breath on the back of her neck. "It's time for a reward." Slowly he removed the blindfold. Clarice blinked, adjusting to the soft light. They were in a part of the floor she had never seen before, a hallway leading to a closed door. "What is this place?" "Something I've never shown anyone," Caesar replied, taking a key from his pocket. "The last sanctuary." He unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The scent was the first thing Clarice noticed, a delicate floral fragrance like lilies and lavender. The room beyond the door was an elegantly decorated bedroom in shades of white and grey. A king-size bed dominated the space, with impeccably arranged silk sheets. There was an antique vanity with several perfume bottles lined up. A reading chair near the window with an open book, page-marked as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. On the wall, framed portraits, a beautiful young woman at different moments. It was hers, Clarice said, not as a question, but a statement. "Your wife's." Caesar remained at the threshold as if he couldn't or wouldn't enter. "Anna Maria. She died 5 years ago." It was the first time he had mentioned her name, spoken directly about his loss. "How?" A heavy silence stretched before he answered. "Officially an accident." In reality, she chose to leave. Suicide. The unspoken word hung between them. "I'm so sorry," Clarice said genuinely. "So am I." Caesar stayed at the door, stiff, controlled, but she could feel the tension emanating from him. "This room remains exactly as she left it. Same scent, same objects. The book on the page where she stopped reading. Why are you showing me this?" He faced her, his silver-grey eyes reflecting a contained pain. "Because you need to understand who you are dealing with." "What's at stake?" Clarice took a few steps into the room, feeling like an intruder in a private shrine. She approached the vanity and saw among the perfume bottles a small carved wooden box. Without thinking, she opened it. Inside were old cassette tapes, each carefully labeled with dates. Her therapy sessions, Caesar explained from the doorway. Anna had difficulties, severe depression, anxiety. She recorded her sessions so she could revisit them later. Clarice noticed something strange. One of the tapes had a different label, not a date but a name, Clarice. Her blood ran cold. "What is this?" Caesar finally entered the room, approaching quickly. When he saw the tape in her hands, his face visibly paled. "You weren't supposed to see that." He tried to take the tape, but Clarice stepped back. "My name is on this." "Why? How could your wife have a tape with my name? Did she know me?" "Give me the tape, Clarice." "Not until you explain." Something dark crossed Caesar's gaze, a flash of fury she had never seen before. For a moment, Clarice feared he might use physical force to retrieve the tape. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the anger vanished, replaced by a weary resignation. "You want to know?" "Do you really want to know?" He stepped away, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of distress. "Very well, listen." He took the tape and walked to a vintage sound system on a shelf. He inserted the cassette and pressed play. The voice that emerged was soft, slightly hoarse, with a faint accent Clarice couldn't place. "I dreamed of her again today. The woman I see in visions, Clarice. Always the same dream. She's walking down a dark hallway looking for a way out. She doesn't see me, but I see her clearly. Wavy brown hair, green eyes with flecks of gold, a small scar above her left eyebrow." Clarice instinctively touched the scar, the result of a childhood fall. The description was too accurate to be a coincidence. The voice continued. "Dr. Santos says it's just my mind creating a representation of myself in another life. A form of escape. But it's more than that. She's real. I know she is. Sometimes when I'm between sleep and wakefulness, I can feel that she exists somewhere. Maybe not now, maybe in the future. And she will be with Caesar. She will save him when I no longer can—" Caesar abruptly stopped the recording. Satisfied. Clarice felt her legs weaken and leaned against the vanity. "This is insane. How could she describe me? Know me? Anna had episodes, visions that the doctors called psychotic delusions, but some things she saw came to pass. It was as if she could occasionally glimpse fragments of the future, and she saw, "Me? With you?" Caesar turned to the window, staring into the night. In the last months before she died, Anna spoke constantly about a woman named Clarice who would come after her. She described her in detail, said this woman would be my salvation. He gave a bitter laugh. I didn't believe it, of course. I thought it was just manifestations of her condition. Until you saw me, he turned slowly. Until I saw you at your mother's funeral 7 years ago. Clarice felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her. You were at my mother's funeral? How, why? Helen Anderson, an English teacher. I didn't know her, but Anna did. Her therapist mentioned a patient named Helen who had passed away, and the daughter's name, Clarice. Anna insisted we go to the wake, said she needed to see with her own eyes. He took a few steps toward her. When I saw you there, exactly as Anna had described, I felt as if time had stopped. You watched me for 7 years. Clarice's tone wavered between disbelief and horror. You planned all this? Brought me to the company? Waited until I was vulnerable enough to accept your deal? Caesar didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on hers. It wasn't as calculated as it sounds. Yes, I followed your life from a distance. I saw your marriage fall apart. I saw you struggle to survive. And something in me resonated with your pain, with your strength. This is sick. An obsession. Perhaps he didn't deny it. Or perhaps Anna truly had a gift. Perhaps the three of us were destined for this moment, for reasons that go beyond rational understanding. Clarice shook her head, trying to organize thoughts that seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. So all this time, all these rituals, what were they? A test to see if I matched her visions? No, Caesar took another step toward her. It was a way to truly know you, to understand if what I felt when I first saw you was real, or just an echo of Anna's obsession. And what did you discover? His eyes burned with an intensity that made her step back. That you are more than any vision could capture. More complex, stronger, more alive. There was something in his voice Clarice had never heard before, a raw, almost painful vulnerability. I can't be your salvation, she said softly. I can't replace Anna or fulfill some delusional prophecy. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking then? What do you really want from me? Caesar took the final step, closing the distance between them. They stood inches apart, the tension as palpable as electricity. I want you to choose, not out of debt, not out of obligation, not because of some mystical destiny. His voice was almost a whisper now, but of your own free will, because something in you also recognizes something in me. The air between them seemed to vibrate. Clarice could feel the heat emanating from him, the masculine scent that was now familiar to her. There was an undeniable attraction, an undercurrent that had been flowing since the first day, but which both had carefully avoided acknowledging. I need time, she said finally, to process all of this. Caesar stepped back, his face returning to its usual controlled mask. Understandable. Our agreement remains as it is. You are free to end it at any time. And if I want to, then everything I promised remains yours. The house. Raphael's schooling. Even your job if you wish to keep it. He walked to the door. The choice will always be yours, Clarice. It is the only true power any of us have. When she left the building that night, Clarice felt as if she were waking from a strange and vivid dream. The revelations about Anna, the visions, the fact that Caesar had been watching her for years, it all seemed to belong in some surreal movie, not her ordinary life. The taxi drove through the wet streets of New York, lights reflecting on the asphalt like fallen stars. Clarice looked out the window, but she didn't really see the city. She only saw Caesar's eyes, the contained pain in them when he spoke of Anna, the almost fierce intensity when he said he wanted her to choose. Arriving home, she found a surprise. Raphael was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with books spread around him. He looked up as she entered. Hi, Mom, you look nice. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. Thanks, honey. Still studying at this hour? Professor Miles helped me get into a scholarship program for colleges abroad. I'm preparing. He seemed different, more focused, more alive. Where were you? Working late. Raphael studied her with a perceptiveness she wasn't used to seeing in him. With Mr. Davison? Clarice felt her face flush. How do you know about him? Wait, Professor Miles mentioned him. Said he's a brilliant man. Complicated, but brilliant. A suspicion began to form in Clarice's mind. Raphael, have you ever seen Professor Miles in person? What does he look like? The teenager shrugged. Tall, grey hair at the temples. Light eyes, kind of scary sometimes. Always in a suit, even when the other teachers are in casual clothes. The description confirmed her suspicions. Professor Miles was Caesar, or someone sent directly by him. The extent of Caesar's influence in her life, and now in her son's, was both frightening and strangely comforting. Has he really been helping you? A lot. Raphael closed the book in front of him. He understands. Things most adults don't. About anger. About feeling like nothing matters. He went through some tough stuff too when he was young. He told you about that? A little. Said he lost his parents early, that he grew up pretty much on his own. Raphael hesitated. He also said he knew my grandmother way back. That she was a great teacher. Clarice sat down, her legs suddenly weak. What else did he say? There was that sometimes people come into our lives for reasons we don't understand right away. And that you're stronger than you think. Raphael smiled, a genuine smile she hadn't seen in a long time. I agree with him on that. That night, lying in bed, Clarice couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Anna's preserved room, heard her voice describing her in impossible detail. She saw Caesar, the intensity in his gaze when he said he wanted her to choose of her own free will. Choose what, exactly? A relationship, a continuation of the strange arrangement they had? Or something else entirely? And most disturbingly, she realized that despite the strangeness of it all, despite the unsettling revelations, a part of her had already chosen. A part that responded to the mutual recognition César had mentioned, that felt the same inexplicable current flowing between them. Her cell phone vibrated with a message. The 24th floor will be open for you whenever you decide. There is no rush. No expectation, only possibility. See. Clarice reread the message several times before replying. I still don't know what to think about all this, but I know I want to keep discovering. See you tomorrow. See. She fell asleep with the phone in her hand, dreaming of dark hallways, doors opening to the unknown, and a soft-voiced woman calling her by name. The days following the revelations about Anna and César's past were a strange combination of professional normalcy and subterranean tension. During the day, Clarice continued her duties as executive assistant, arranging meetings, screening calls, managing the intricate web of appointments and secrets that made up Caesar Davison's professional life. At night, however, she did not return to the 24th floor. She needed time, space to process everything she had discovered. Caesar respected her distance. He didn't push, didn't question. At work, he maintained the same professional demeanor as always, perhaps with only a slight softening in his tone when he addressed her. But Clarice would occasionally catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, a gaze that combined patience and a restrained hunger that made her heart race. At home, Raphael continued his surprising transformation. His grades improved, his isolation lessened. Professor Miles, whom Clarice now knew to be someone sent by Caesar, if not Caesar himself, had become a constant and positive influence in the teenager's life. Part of her wanted to question this manipulation, this calculated intrusion into her family life. But how could she condemn something that was so clearly benefiting her son? On the third night after the revelations, Clarice found a small, elegant package at her apartment door. Inside was only a flash drive and a card with Caesar's precise handwriting, so you can understand better. No pressure. When she plugged the device into her laptop, she found dozens of files organized chronologically, medical records, therapy notes, photographs. The complete history of Ana Maria Vargas Davison. Anna had been born in Lisbon, the daughter of a Brazilian diplomat and a Portuguese pianist. She had grown up between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. She had shown the first signs of emotional instability in her teens, depressive episodes, alternating with periods of frantic creativity. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 21, she had gone through several hospitalizations and treatments. She met Caesar at a charity event in New York, he an emerging entrepreneur in the security business, she accompanying her father on a diplomatic mission. They fell in love quickly, intensely. They married 6 months later. The early years were happy from what Clarice could gather from the photos and letters. Anna smiled radiant, beside Caesar on beaches, in restaurants, at social events. But then the medical files showed a gradual deterioration. New medications, attempts at experimental treatments, long stays in specialized clinics. In a video dated 3 years before her death, Anna spoke directly to the camera. She was visibly thinner, with deep dark circles, but her eyes still shone with a restless inner light. Caesar, if you're watching this, it means I've had another episode. Remember our agreement. You can't give up your life for me. You can't let yourself be consumed. I see futures, my love. Several possible futures. In some, you lose yourself trying to save me. In others, you find a way to go on. There's a woman, Clarice. I don't know who she is yet, but she will be important. She will understand what it's like to carry shadows without being consumed by them. Clarice spent hours immersed in those files, feeling simultaneously like an invader and an archaeologist, excavating layers of a story that, inexplicably, seemed intertwined with her own. There was something moving and unsettling in the way Anna spoke of her, with familiarity, with something close to affection, as if she knew a version of Clarice that Clarice herself didn't yet know. The last file was the hardest, the police report on Anna's death. Officially classified as an accident, but the subtext was clear. She had jumped from the balcony of their penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side after days of insomnia and erratic behavior. She had left a letter for Cesar. Forgive me for not being strong enough to continue. Find her, find Clarice. She will show you how to live with the shadows without being devoured by them. When she finished reading, Clarice realized she was crying. Silent tears for a woman she had never met, but who in some inexplicable way had known her, who had seen her face, her name, her existence, years before their paths crossed. That same night she sent a message to Cesar. Tomorrow, 24th floor, 9 p.m. The reply came almost immediately. I'll be waiting. Throughout the next day, Clarice felt a strange calm, like the one that precedes great storms. She performed her tasks with mechanical precision, barely registering the people around her. Fernanda watched her with renewed curiosity, but asked no questions. Caesar was out all day, external meetings that kept him away from the office. Perhaps it was for the best. Clarice didn't know if she could maintain her professional composure if she saw him before their planned meeting. At 8 o'clock, she called Raphael. Honey, I'm going to be late tonight. There's dinner in the fridge, you just have to heat it up. Okay, Mom, I have a video call with my study group at 9, then I'm going to bed. He paused. Mom, are you okay? Your voice sounds different. Clarice smiled, touched by his concern. I'm fine, just tired. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? Okay, Professor Miles asked me to tell you that I got pre-approved for the scholarship program. That's wonderful, honey. I'm so proud of you. He said you would be. Said we're more alike than I think, stubborn and resilient. After hanging up, Clarice thought about those words. Who was this man who seemed to know her so well, who influenced her son so positively, who had watched her for years as if she were the answer to some question he didn't even know how to formulate? At 9 o'clock sharp, the private elevator took her to the 24th floor. She was dressed simply. Black pants, a white silk blouse, no jewelry other than small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. She had not followed any color instruction this time. Tonight would be on her terms. The floor was different. The lights were softer, more diffuse. Candles had been lit in strategic spots, creating pools of golden light amidst the gloom. Soft music was playing. Not classical or jazz like the other times, but a soulful female vocalist singing a song about time and transformation. Caesar was standing by the window, just as on the first night. He wore a simple white shirt and dark pants. He looked simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, his silhouette cut against the New York night sky. You came, he said without turning, sensing her presence. I saw the files, Clarice replied, walking to stand beside him, both of them contemplating the city. I saw Anna. I heard her voice. I read her words. And I still don't fully understand. Part of me thinks this is all madness, visions, premonitions, intertwined destinies. Another part, she took a deep breath. Another part recognizes something, a truth that goes beyond logic. Caesar turned to face her. The candlelight cast dancing shadows on his angular face, making his expression even harder to read. What do you want, Clarice? Now that you know everything, What do you really want? The question was simple, direct, and yet it contained universes. I want to understand why I feel this way, she answered with raw honesty. Why, despite all the strangeness, all the manipulations, everything I've discovered, I still feel this connection, this attraction that goes beyond the physical, this feeling that there's something unfinished between us, something that needs to be explored. A silence stretched between them, charged with unreleased electricity. When Anna died, Caesar spoke finally, his voice low and controlled. Something in me died too, the ability to feel beyond the surface, to truly connect. I existed, I functioned, I built my empire, but I was hollow inside. He took a step toward her. Then I saw you at your mother's funeral, exactly as Anna had described. It was like an electric shock. Something I believed was dead and buried suddenly stirred. You could have approached me then, introduced yourself. And say what? A sad smile touched his lips. Hello. My late wife had visions of you. I believe we're destined to meet. Clarice couldn't suppress a small smile. When you put it that way, so I waited. I watched from a distance. I created opportunities for our paths to cross naturally. The job at the company, he nodded. When you applied, I saw the chance, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed to be sure. Sure of what? That what I felt was real. Not just an echo of Anna's obsession. Not just my desperation to fill a void. Cesar took another step, now close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body. That's why the rituals. That's why the nights here. I needed to know you truly, to see beyond the surface. And what did you see? His eyes were burning now, the mask of control beginning to crack. I saw a woman of extraordinary strength, who has been through abandonment, loss, betrayal, and yet has not lost her essence, who fiercely protects what she loves, who carries wounds but is not defined by them. Each word penetrated Clarice like a well-aimed arrow, hitting parts of herself she didn't even fully know. You manipulated me, she said, but with no real accusation in her voice. You planned every detail. Yes and no. I created the stage, the opportunities, but every choice was yours, every revelation, every moment of truth between us that cannot be manufactured. And now, what do you want from me now, Caesar? He raised his hand slowly, as if afraid she might pull away, and touched her face with almost reverent gentleness. It was the first time he had touched her like this, with clear intent, without the pretext of guiding or instructing her. I want you to choose, Clarice. With full knowledge, without manipulations, without games, without debts or obligations. His touch was warm against her skin, sending waves of electricity through her body. Choose what? Whether you want to explore what exists between us, whether you want to discover how far this connection we both feel goes. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Whether you want to be mine, not by agreement or contract, but by your own desire. The air between them seemed to vibrate with unrealized possibilities. Clarice felt her heart hammer against her ribs, her breath quickening. There was danger there, she knew it. Cesar was complex, powerful, carrying his own shadows. But there was also possibility, redemption, something neither of them had found before. And if I say no? She asked, testing him. Then everything I promised remains yours. The paid-off mortgage, Raphael's education. Even your job if you want to keep it, though in a different position to avoid awkwardness. He lowered his hand. And I will respect your decision absolutely. No retaliation, no pressure. Clarice studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or falsehood. She found none. Only that raw intensity that had always both attracted and frightened her. And if I say yes? Something dark and hungry shone in his eyes. Then we start over. No games, no rituals. Just two adults exploring a connection that neither of us fully understands, but that we both feel. Clarice closed her eyes for a moment, searching within herself for the true answer. There was fear, yes, hesitation. But there was also something stronger, an impulse toward him that went beyond reason, beyond the physical. Something that perhaps Anna had foreseen years before. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. Yes, she said simply. I want to explore this. I want to discover what exists between us. Caesar's carefully maintained control seemed to crumble at those words. Without warning, he pulled her to him, one hand on her waist, the other on her face, and kissed her with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't a gentle or hesitant kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had contained his desire for too long, who was finally allowing himself to feel fully. His lips were firm, demanding, his tongue seeking an entrance she granted without resistance. Clarisse felt herself melt against him, her own hands finding their way to his hair, his neck, pulling him closer. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing all the tension accumulated over weeks of proximity without touch, of denied attraction, of only hinted at possibilities. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cesar pressed his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if trying to anchor himself in reality. "You have no idea," he whispered, "how long I've waited for this." "Tell me," she asked, her hands still on his neck, feeling his rapid pulse under her fingers. "Since the first moment I saw you. Since you walked into my office with your pride wounded but intact, trying not to show how desperate you were." He opened his eyes, staring at her with feverish intensity. "Do you know what I saw in that instant?" She shook her head. "I saw someone like me, someone who carries invisible scars, who has learned to wear masks, who knows darkness but chooses the light anyway." The words touched something deep inside her. Clarisse had never seen herself that way, but she recognized the truth in what he said. They had both survived loss. They had both learned to adapt, to protect themselves. They both carried responsibilities greater than they should have. Cesar kissed her again, more gently this time, a silent question on his lips. She responded without hesitation, deepening the kiss, feeling the desire grow between them, no longer contained, no longer denied. His hands slid down her back, his body pressing her against the window. Clarisse felt the cool glass against her shoulder blades, a counterpoint to the heat emanating from Cesar. It was a dizzying sensation, being so high up, with the entire city stretching out below them like a carpet of lights. "Are you sure?" he asked, his lips tracing a path down her neck. "We can go slow. There's no rush." In response, Clarisse began to unbutton his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with the intensity of the moment. "I've been waiting too," she whispered, without knowing for what, without understanding what I felt. "But now I know." His open shirt revealed a sculpted torso marked by scars, some small and old, others more recent and prominent. Traces of a life she still barely knew. She touched them gently, tracing their outlines with her fingertips. "One day I'll tell you about every one of them," Cesar promised, his voice hoarse with desire. He lifted her into his arms with surprising ease, carrying her across the space to an area she had never seen before. An elegantly decorated bedroom, dominated by a large bed. "It's not her room," he said, noticing her momentary hesitation. "I would never bring you there. This place is just ours." Cesar placed her on the bed with reverence, as if she were something infinitely precious. His eyes, always so controlled, now burned with barely contained desire. He watched her for a long moment, as if wanting to memorize every detail. "You are more beautiful than any vision could capture," he murmured, leaning in to kiss her again. What followed was a slow, deliberate exploration. Cesar undressed her gradually, kissing every inch of skin he revealed. There was no rush in his movements, only absolute concentration, as if he were performing a sacred ritual. Clarisse surrendered to the sensations, allowing herself to experience pleasure without guilt, without worries, without the constant weight of responsibilities she always carried. With Cesar, she could be just a woman, desired, admired, valued. When he finally joined with her, the world seemed to disappear around them. There was only the warmth of their bodies, the synchrony of their movements, the growing intensity that consumed them. It wasn't just physical desire being sated, it was recognition, connection on a level that transcended the corporeal. Afterward, lying amidst tangled sheets, Cesar held her close, a protective arm around her as if he feared she might disappear. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. "I'm thinking about destinies," Clarisse replied, her head resting on his chest. "About coincidences, about paths that cross for reasons we don't fully understand. Do you believe this was predestined?" That Anna really saw the future. She considered the question for a moment. "I don't know if I believe in destiny as something fixed, unchangeable, but maybe there are possibilities, potentials, paths that are more likely to be realized. And this was one of them?" Clarisse propped herself up slightly to look him in the eye. "I think so. Not because of some mystical force, but because there's something genuine between us. Something that transcends the strange circumstances of our meeting. Caesar touched her face with unusual tenderness. You make me want to believe in second chances, in new beginnings. I thought you were too cynical for that, she smiled. I was. He pulled her in for another kiss, slow and deep. You're changing me, Clarice Anderson, and I haven't decided if that scares me or fascinates me. Maybe both, she replied against his lips. The night wore on as they alternated between intimate conversations and moments of renewed passion. It was as if both were trying to recover a time they didn't know they had lost, sharing fragments of their lives, of their souls. Caesar spoke of his difficult childhood in the suburbs of a city in Mississippi, the son of a maid raising 3 children on her own. About how he had won a scholarship to a military academy that changed his trajectory. About his years in the army, in the special forces where he learned discipline and control. About how he built his security empire, using contacts and knowledge gained in operations he still couldn't fully detail. Clarice, in turn, revealed fears she had never shared with anyone. The terror of failing as a mother, of not being able to protect Raphael from the world, the fear that her son might inherit his father's emotional instability, the fear of never truly trusting someone again after Roger's betrayals. There was an intoxicating freedom in sharing such vulnerabilities, in letting down the masks they both wore in the outside world. In the early morning, as the city began to wake and the first light of dawn tinted the horizon, they remained awake, intertwined, as if fearing that reality might intrude and break the bubble they had created. What happens now? Clarice asked, her finger tracing the line of his jaw. Anything we want, Caesar replied, capturing her hand and kissing her palm gently. No more contracts, no more rituals, just us discovering this path together. And Raphael? A smile touched his lips. Your son is extraordinary. He has your strength, your determination. Professor Miles is actually an ex-military man who works for me, a specialist in adolescent psychology. I thought Raphael needed a positive male role model in his life. Clarice studied him with renewed curiosity. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I tried. Caesar suddenly grew serious. But I need you to understand something, Clarice. Everything I did, the arrangements, the manipulations, the orchestrated coincidences, was to create opportunities, not to force outcomes. Every genuine choice was yours, and it always will be. She nodded, recognizing the truth in those words. As calculated as Caesar's initial moves were, the connection that had developed between them was authentic, organic. It could not have been manufactured or forced. I have to go, Clarice said, looking reluctantly at the clock. Raphael will be waking up soon. I know. Caesar didn't try to stop her, though his eyes clearly conveyed his wish for her to stay. I'll see you later at the office. She smiled, a spark of humor in her eyes. Do you think we'll be able to maintain our professional composure after this? We'll have to try. He pulled her in for one last kiss, although I suspect Fernanda will notice the change immediately. That woman has a disturbing sixth sense. When Clarice left the building, the sun was already rising. New York was waking up to another day of frantic activity, but she felt strangely calm, centered, as if something that had been out of alignment within her had finally found its proper place. Arriving home, she found Raphael making breakfast, another recent and welcome change. Good morning. Mom, he greeted, looking at her curiously. You look different. Clarice smiled, thinking about how to explain the transformations in her life to her son. Let's just say I'm going through some positive changes. Raphael nodded, with a surprising perceptiveness for someone so young. Does it have to do with Mr. Davison? She blinked, caught off guard. How did you... Professor Miles mentioned you two were getting closer. He shrugged, turning his attention back to the toast he was making. He said it would be good for both of us. Clarice watched her son with renewed astonishment. And what do you think about that? Raphael seemed to consider the question seriously before answering. I think you deserve to be happy, Mom. After everything with my dad, you deserve someone who really sees you. The simplicity and depth of those words moved her. And you're okay with this possibility. I like Professor Miles. If Mr. Davison is anything like him... He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his young face. Besides, I've never seen you like this. There's something different in your eyes. Clarice hugged her son, feeling immense gratitude for the maturity and understanding he showed. You're amazing, you know that? I know, he replied with a touch of teenage humor. Now go take a shower. No offense, Mom, but you look like you didn't sleep at all. She laughed, ruffling his hair as she did when he was a child. You're cheeky. In the following weeks, a new reality began to take shape. During the day, Clarice and Cesar maintained a strictly professional facade, though the looks they exchanged carried silent promises. At night, they explored the depth of their connection, sometimes on the 24th floor, other times at her apartment after Raphael was asleep. It wasn't just physical, though the chemistry between them was undeniable. It was a mutual discovery of kindred souls, of people who carried similar scars and found comfort in reciprocal recognition. Cesar gradually opened up, sharing more of his inner world, his carefully masked insecurities, his rarely admitted fears, his almost forgotten hopes. With Clarice, he could lower the guard he had kept up for so long. She, in turn, rediscovered parts of herself that had been suppressed by years of struggle for survival. Her creativity, her humor, her ability to dream beyond the immediate. It all re-emerged like plants after a long drought. Not everything was perfect, of course. There were arguments, disagreements. Cesar was accustomed to absolute control, to having his orders obeyed without question. Clarice valued her hard-won independence and didn't hesitate to challenge him when necessary. The clash of wills sometimes generated sparks, but those same sparks only intensified the attraction between them. A month later, Cesar surprised her with an unexpected invitation during a dinner on the 24th floor. I want you and Raphael to come live with me. Clarice nearly choked on her wine. What? I have a house in Greenwich, Connecticut. I rarely use it. I prefer the apartment in the city for convenience. But it's a good place for a family. The word family hung between them, laden with unexplored meanings. Cesar, this is very sudden. We've barely started. We started 7 years ago when I first saw you, he replied with that intensity that never failed to affect her. The rest was just preparation. She shook her head, half exasperated, half fascinated by his unshakable certainty. We need to think about Raphael, how this would affect him. Raphael has already approved the idea. Clarice blinked, surprised. You talked to my son about this before talking to me? Not exactly. Professor Miles mentioned the possibility to gauge his reaction. It was surprisingly positive. She didn't know whether to be annoyed at the manipulation or impressed by the strategy. You really don't leave anything to chance, do you? Cesar took her hand across the table. When it comes to something that truly matters, I leave no room for error. And you, Clarice, you and Raphael, you matter. More than anything else in my life. The intensity in his eyes was almost frightening. Clarice knew it was not a light declaration coming from a man like him, a man who had built his life around control and power. I need time to think, she finally replied, to talk to Raphael directly, to make sure it's the best thing for us. Cesar nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Time is something we have now. That night, when she returned home, Clarice found Raphael still awake, studying in the living room. Honey, we need to talk. He looked up from his books, an expression of expectation on his face. Is it about moving into Mr. Davison's house? She shouldn't have been surprised at this point. Yes. Did Professor Miles mention it to you? Raphael nodded. He said it was a possibility, that Mr. Davison wanted us to be a family. That word again, family. Something they had both lost in different ways. Something that perhaps they could rebuild together. What do you think about it, Rafa? Honestly. The teenager closed his book, thoughtful. At first I thought it was weird, like he's your boss and all, but after I got to know Professor Miles, who works for him, I started to see it might not be so crazy, he shrugged. Besides, I've seen how you've changed these past few weeks. You seem happier, more alive. I am, Clarice admitted, but my happiness can't come at the expense of yours. Mom, you've sacrificed everything for me for years. Maybe it's time you thought about yourself for a bit. Raphael smiled. That smile, that so much resembled the boy he had been before hardship, had prematurely hardened him. And the house has a pool, and a home theater, and like a real science lab. Clarice laughed. I see Professor Miles was quite detailed in his description. He even showed me pictures. It's practically a mansion, Mom. Raphael hesitated before adding, and it has the perfect room for me, with a view of the lake. She realized the decision was practically made. Her son, always so reserved and cautious since his father's abandonment, was open to this change, to this new family configuration. I'll think about it seriously, she promised, kissing his forehead. Now go to sleep. It's late. The next day, Clarice arrived at the office earlier than usual. She knew Cesar was also an early riser, often starting his day before 7. He was in his office, as expected, reviewing documents with the absolute concentration he dedicated to every task. Good morning, she said, closing the door behind her. Cesar looked up, an immediate smile lighting his normally austere face. It was a transformation that few had the privilege to witness. The man behind the mask. Good morning. I didn't expect to see you so early. Clarice walked until she stood before him, the imposing desk between them. I spoke with Raphael last night. And? And apparently my son is already mentally decorating his new room with a lake view. Cesar's smile widened. So is that a yes? It's a let's try, she corrected, with a few conditions. I'm listening. First, I'm keeping my apartment. At least for now, it's my only asset, my safety net. I can't just abandon it. He nodded without hesitation. Understandable. Second, I want to know exactly what your business involves. Everything. If I'm going to join my life with yours, I need to know what I'm getting into. A slight frown. Some things are confidential, Clarice, for your and Raphael's safety. I'm not asking for operational details or client names. I want to know the nature of what you do, if it's legal, if it's ethical. She stared at him firmly. I have a son to protect. Cesar studied her for a long moment before nodding again. Fair. I will have that conversation with you, tonight. And third, Clarice continued, this happens at our pace. Not yours, not on some predetermined schedule based on visions or intuitions, at a speed that is comfortable for me and for Raphael. Agreed. He stood up, walking around the desk to stand before her. Any more conditions, Clarice Anderson? There was a glint of amusement in his eyes now, a softness few would associate with the feared CEO. Just one more, she said, feeling her heart race at his proximity. That you kiss me now before Fernanda arrives, and we have to go back to pretending we're just boss and assistant. Cesar laughed, a rare and precious sound, before pulling her into his arms. That, he murmured against her lips, is a condition I will be more than happy to fulfill. The kiss was both a promise and a celebration, the beginning of something new, built on unlikely foundations, but deeply felt by both. That night, as promised, Cesar revealed the true nature of his business. Davison's security operated mostly within the law, providing protection services for corporations and public figures, but there was a special division, the so-called Project Phoenix, that operated in gray areas. We help people disappear, Cesar explained as they sat on the balcony of the 24th floor under the starry New York sky. People in danger, witnesses, victims of domestic violence who need a complete reset. We give them new identities, new beginnings. That's why the government is involved, Clarice understood. The meetings with the Department of Defense. He nodded. We have contracts with several agencies. Some operations are unconventional but never illegal, never unethical. Each case is evaluated individually. His eyes sought hers. I built this empire, Clarice, but never at the cost of my soul. Somehow she believed him. The Cesar she had come to know in recent weeks, the man behind the imposing facade, was not unprincipled. Complex, yes. Intense, certainly, but not amoral. 2 weeks later, Clarice and Raphael moved into the house in Greenwich. It was indeed practically a mansion, a sleek modern construction amidst lush gardens, overlooking a small man-made lake. Raphael's room was exactly as Professor Miles had described, complete with state-of-the-art technology and the promised water view. The adjustment wasn't instantaneous. There were challenges, adaptations, Caesar, accustomed to solitude and absolute control, had to learn to share space, decisions, routines. Clarice and Raphael, used to a modest life and forced independence, had to get used to abundance and the constant presence of staff. But gradually they found their rhythm. A new family was forming, built not on traditional expectations or social conventions, but on conscious choices, on genuine connections. One evening, about 3 months after the move, Clarice found César in the home office, contemplating a framed photograph on his desk. It was a picture of Anna, smiling at the camera on some distant beach. "I miss you being here," he said without turning, sensing Clarice's presence. She walked over to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She will always be a part of your life. You don't have to hide or deny her for my sake." Caesar covered her hand with his. "She would have liked you. She would have seen what I see." "And what do you see?" He turned, pulling her onto his lap in a fluid motion. "I see the woman who brought me back to life, who taught me that it's possible to carry scars without being defined by them." His eyes were unusually bright. "Who showed me there is light even in the deepest shadows." Clarice felt her heart expand with the warmth of those words. "And I see a man who has learned to lower his defenses, to trust again, to build instead of just survive." They kissed slowly, with the intimacy of lovers who no longer needed to rush, who knew they had time to explore, to discover, to grow together. "I have something for you," Caesar said when they parted. He opened a drawer and took out a small velvet box. Clarice felt her breath catch. "Caesar." "It's not what you're thinking. Not yet." He smiled with that glint of humor that was becoming more and more frequent. "Though that is definitely in my future plans." When she opened the box, she found a key and a small flash drive. "The key is to Anna's room," Caesar explained. "I finally decided to turn it into something new. A studio, perhaps. A space for healing, not for preserving pain." Clarice felt the symbolic importance of that gesture. The sanctuary Caesar had kept untouched for 5 years would now be transformed, integrated into the present life instead of being kept as a monument to the past. And the flash drive? All of Anna's recordings, including the ones that mention you. He took her hands. "I want you to have them, to decide what to do with them, destroy them, keep them, listen to them. The choice is yours." It was a transfer of power, of control, from a man who rarely relinquished any control. "Thank you," she said simply, recognizing the depth of the gesture. That night, after Caesar had fallen asleep, Clarice slipped out quietly onto the balcony of the master suite. The sky was clear, dotted with stars. In the distance, the lights of New York City glittered like a reflection of the firmament. In her hands, the small flash drive felt as if it weighed a ton. All of Anna's recordings, all the fragments of visions, of premonitions, of inexplicable connections that had somehow traced a path to this moment. For an instant, she considered throwing it into the lake, letting the past finally rest, allowing the future to unfold without the shadow of expectations or predetermined destinies. But then she thought better of it. Anna's visions, as unsettling as they were part of the journey that had brought them here. They were a chapter in the story that she and Caesar were now writing together. Clarice put the flash drive in her pocket. One day, perhaps, she would listen to those recordings, or perhaps not. The important thing was that the choice was hers. As Caesar had said months ago during that first proposal that changed everything, the power of choice was the only true power any of them possessed. And she had chosen. Not by destiny, not by manipulation, not out of necessity or debt, but of her own free will, out of recognition of a connection that transcended rational explanation, out of love, complex, imperfect, real. Back in the room, she watched Caesar sleep, his normally severe face softened by slumber. She slid into bed beside him, and immediately, even in his sleep, he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Clarice smiled in the dim light, feeling a peace she had never imagined possible. There were more challenges ahead, certainly. More discoveries, more adjustments, more difficult and joyous moments. But they would face it all together, she, Caesar, and Raphael. An unlikely family, built on ruins and new beginnings. The last thing she thought before falling asleep was that, after all, maybe Anna had been right. Maybe some souls really did recognize each other across time and space. Maybe some meetings were inevitable, not because of some mystical destiny, but because